This is iCastNews.com, live and direct from United Nations headquarters in New York City, USA. It's 2 minutes to midnight. The call of the world nuclear situation is dire, and that is understating the situation. This is bubbling under and bubbling over, and we're turning to the world situation. It's nuclear danger, it's heating of the atmosphere, and the lack of cool rhetoric. If you thought that the Palace of Peace, the United Nations, if you thought the dance of diplomacy, which is supposed to be diplomatic, was getting bellicose and belligerent, if you thought a war of words, a verbal warfare kind of approach to international life, reminiscent of the Cold War, was haunting the United Nations, you were right. It's getting hot in here, and it's getting hot outside as environmental degradation and steps to ameliorate the situation with the environment are going nowhere. That, from the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, as they unveiled their 2018 Doomsday Clock. The Doomsday Clock is an old, venerable measurement, a barometer of where the world stands. It was created just after the Second World War under the leadership of Chicago physicists, nuclear scientists, led by the redoubtable Eugene Rabinowitz, a man who should have received the Nobel Peace Prize. He and others who participated in the Manhattan Project, the creation of the atomic bomb, came up with the idea of a doomsday clock. It played on the image of an apocalypse, midnight, and used the idiom of the times, the countdown to the launch of the ultimate destructive weapon, the nuclear bomb that destroyed Hiroshima and thrust America and the world into the nuclear and scary Cold War age. The people at the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists measure the danger to the world, and they found that last year, with the rhetoric unleashed at the United Nations, the tests unveiled from North Korea of missiles capable of carrying nuclear weapons, maybe of producing hydrogen bombs that could land in other lands, and the deliberate targeting, the threats of ultimate destruction here at the United Nations by the President of the United States, Donald John Trump, who ridiculed the North Korean leader as Rocket Man and threatened to wipe that country off the face of the earth. These have provoked the people at the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists to say that the world is in the most peril since 1953, when it was also 2 minutes to midnight. The measure of danger is such that, unlike 1991, if you look at this graph of the various time clocks, 1991, when the Soviet Union fell apart, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists said that the world was a much safer place, 14, 15 minutes from midnight. But recently, with the actions of Russia in Ukraine, in threatening hybrid warfare, in making noise at least about taking on NATO member countries, the world is a more dangerous place. And they did this before the Pentagon issued its nuclear posture review, which for the first time goes away from the idea of mutually assured destruction, that the only time nuclear weapons would be used is in a battle between the United States and the Soviet Union or Russia, and now is intimating that it may be okay to use tactical nukes in other situations. This frightens the other great powers that have nuclear weapons. And there's a new nuclear member on the block, North Korea, led by a very unknown character who's making a lot of noise. In addition to this, why are things like 1953? Why is the clock 2 minutes to midnight? It's not only the Korean conundrum. The world has seen the most years of warm temperature since temperatures have been recorded, all in the 21st century. The natural disasters that visited all parts of the world, the Caribbean, Houston, China, Europe, are part of environmental degradation and ecological nightmare. And this year, the United States has backed away from the one treaty, the Paris Accords, that promised some across the globe progress in restoring the environment. This too figures in the calculation of the people at the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists of why the danger is starker now than ever before. They said, in its rush to dismantle rational climate and energy policy, the U.S. administration has ignored scientific fact and well-founded economic analysis. To call the world situation, the world nuclear situation, dire is to understate the danger. The idea of the doomsday clock and doomsday has entered the popular culture. Entered the popular culture. What is more popular culture than a comic book? Even Superman. Even Superman did not have the wherewithal to do something in the early years of the Cold War to stop the destruction of the planet. 1953, 2 minutes to midnight, Korean War going on. The hydrogen bomb is exploding. North Korea may now have a hydrogen bomb. The warning of the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists is that we are all in grave danger. That it is 2 minutes to midnight. That the kind of destruction unleashed on another country in Asia, Japan, a nuclear holocaust, is nearer to being possible than any time in recent memory. And the people at the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists call on everyone, but particularly politicians and leaders, particularly people who come to the United Nations to discuss, whose actions at the United Nations are a barometer of our new Cold War world, our new belligerent world, our new world full of verbal warfare, our new world with more nuclear threats than in a very long time. Calls on all of them to do something, to get off their nationalistic high horses and think about the world and set that clock, that doomsday clock, further from midnight, not closer as it's gotten in the last year. For ICAStnews.com, live and direct from United Nations headquarters in New York City, for Bubbling Under and Bubbling Over, I'm Jonathan Sanders.